Hey everybody, welcome to the Morning Devo with Bowo. Ezekiel 29 and 30 is going to be on the list today of reading. So it's kind of it's going to be some longer chapters. So sometimes, as we do a devotion, sometimes we just take a little small section of the Bible. And sometimes people just do a verse, but I actually go through the entire Bible, so I take a little more chunk, but that way I can get through it. And that's sometimes the cool thing about just if you take a chunk at a time, you get through the book, right? You got to start with one page and get to the other. Anyway, good morning on the Morning Devo with Bo O. Bo Willette's my name, Ouellettete, Southern California boy, grew up out there, born in Encino, that's right, San Fernando Valley, and moved into Simi Valley and have wonderful friends out there. Great experience. Love just my background, and raised very progressive, super progressive, you could say, and really have seen kind of both sides in my life, in my 50s now. So that's a little bit about me. So let's get into it. You can always check out the archives at my YouTube at Bo Willette. Just type Bo Willette in the search bar. Very French name. And you do that, you'll get to the profile page, and there's a bunch of different playlists there for you, different books of the Bible. I kind of started with the New Testament, went through it. Now I'm in the Old Testament, going through that. So let's get into it. A message from Yahweh, right? That's what's happening here, right? It's from God through Ezekiel to Egypt. Right? Egypt, kind of interesting. There's a lot to say about Egypt, but let's see kind of what God says about it. That's the idea here. On January 7th, during the 10th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, this message came to me from the Lord. So a lot of these messages have come to Ezekiel during King Jehoiachin's captivity. And so we see that, Ezekiel now is speaking to people, Jewish people, in captivity. They're in Babylon. It says, Son of man, turn and face Egypt and prophesy against Pharaoh. Okay. And it says, and against the people of Egypt. Give them this message from the sovereign Lord. Okay, so here we go. Let's see what it says to Egypt. I am your enemy, O Pharaoh, king of Egypt, your great monster lurking in the streams of the Nile. For you have said, the Nile River is mine. I made it for myself. I will put hooks in your jaws and drag you out of the land with fish sticking to your scales. I will leave you and all your fish stranded in the wilderness to die. Oh, you're going to be like a fish out of water. Right? I'm going to take you right out of that place. It sounds uncomfortable, right? It's always not a comforting idea, the idea of being uprooted and moved. Just real quick, think of how many people have been uprooted and moved over the last 4 years, even just due to, different mandates that were put on people, right? People lost jobs, and a lot of people were uprooted in some serious ways. Never fun. I would imagine, I definitely was uprooted in California and came to Tucson. And that was an exciting time, but, always a little nerve-wracking. Now, this is to Pharaoh and to the people of Egypt. You guys are going to be uprooted. You think you got the Nile. You think everything's going great. You peace and safety, it says, but then what? Sudden destruction comes upon you. Ooh. I will leave you and all your fish stranded in the wilderness to die. You will be unburied on the open ground. You're going to rot. For I have given you as food to the wild animals and birds. All the people of Egypt will know that I am the Lord. For to Israel you are just a staff made of reeds. Now it's interesting. Egypt is a conquered place. This is what a lot of us don't realize is that, Islam wasn't the original religion of Egypt or Saudi Arabia. But let's just take Egypt, right? The pharaohs didn't worship Islam, right? They had other ideas, other thoughts. Yeah, Egypt at some point gets conquered, right? Well, here we see God saying it's going to get uprooted. It's going to go through Pharaoh. It's not going to be like it was anymore. It's not going to be like, Egypt's not going to be the same. It's not going to stay the same. But it's going to change, right? You even look at, Latino community, right? And I think, they speak Spanish. Why do they speak Spanish? Was that the original language of Mexico? No, it's Spain came over, right? It's a conquered group, right? And then they learn this other language, sometimes through force and coercion and different things like that. That's how a lot of us are, right? Things have happened in our past. And so it says, so Egypt's going to go through some changes. And it says, all the people of Egypt will know that I am the Lord. For Israel, you were just a staff made of reeds. When Israel leaned on you, you splintered and broke and stabbed her in the armpit. When she put her weight on you, you gave way and her back was thrown out of joint. Hey, Israel went to you, Egypt, but man, you didn't really help her out. You were like a weak back. They leaned on you, but you snapped, So it is sad during the time of Ezekiel that the people of Israel, the government, wanted to, in a sense, buddy up to Egypt to try to go against Babylon. It didn't work, right? Yahweh, through Jeremiah, said it wasn't going to work. But this is what's being spoken of here. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, I will bring an army against you, O Egypt, and destroy both people and animals. The land of Egypt will become a desolate wasteland, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Because you said the Nile River is mine, I made it. So that's two things. 2 times it says that. I am now an enemy of both you and your river. I will make the land of Egypt a totally desolate wasteland from Migdol to Aswan, as far south as the border of Ethiopia. For 40 years, not a soul will pass that way. Wow, the border, all the way down to Ethiopia. And it says, it will be completely uninhabited. I will make Egypt desolate, and it will be surrounded by other desolate nations. Its cities will be empty and desolate for 40 years, surrounded by other ruined cities. I will scatter the Egyptians to distant lands. Wow, Egyptians will go all over the place. And it says, but this is the sovereign Lord. Also, this is what he says. At the end of the 40 years, I will bring the Egyptians home again from the nations to which they have been scattered. I will restore the prosperity of Egypt and bring its people back to the land of Pathros in southern Egypt, from which they came. But Egypt will remain an unimportant minor kingdom. It will be the lowliest of all the nations, never again great enough to rise above its neighbors. Interesting. Egypt won't be that dominant place that it once was. This certainly is kind of true in my lifetime, where Egypt isn't really that on the world scene. It's not really that prominent, dominant. You read about the pharaohs and what it was like Egypt back in the day, and it seems like such a glorious time for the nation of Egypt. It seems like they had quite a military. Obviously, their building projects were unbelievable. And we can see that today as people go and take their visits to see the pyramids and the Sphinx and everything like that. I mean, there's a mystery that surrounds Egypt. And here you have this really cool prophecy through Ezekiel that they too will go through a scattering, but they will come back to that land. But they're not going to be quite what they were. And it says, then Israel will no longer be tempted to trust in Egypt for help. Egypt's shattered condition will remind Israel of how sinful she was to trust in Egypt in earlier days. Then Israel will know that I am the sovereign Lord. So it has to do really about Israel and about Israel's relationship with Egypt. And maybe I can glean some good stuff out of that, right? The idea of, hey, am I really trusting in Egypt, to get me to where I need to go? What does Egypt represent to Israel? It represents the past, right? A time of slavery, those kind of things. Am I really relishing in my past, in the things that bound me, the things that enslaved me? Have I progressed from my progressiveness of my youth? Or do I long for those days of Egypt? You might have heard Egypt put as kind of in a metaphorical way like that. Don't go back to Egypt, meaning don't go back to that place that, that slavery. Even though you think in your mind, oh, it was so cool, it was so cool. Was it really so cool? But in Ezekiel's time, Egypt became that kind of crutch, that thing that we lean back on, that thing that helps us. Man, and that really resonates with me. In my life, there's things that become crutches, kind of little habits, ways of coping. And instead of trusting in the Lord and leaning on the Lord alone, we can lean on other things fairly easily. Even though they break, they're not strong. They can't hold us. They're not going to supply you with the joy that you need, the strength that you need, the security that I need, all the things that we need as human beings. Those little Egypts in our life, won't help us. Now, there's a New Testament passage that you might know of, and it's found in the book of Hebrews. But it says, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us therefore lay aside the weight and the sin that so easily ensnares, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. The idea is there's weights. Does that make sense? The weight that can be on us. That can be like trusting something, going back to that Egypt. Egypt becomes a place of slavery, a place of heaviness. And it says, look to Jesus. So what's the remedy? To look to Jesus. Keep our eyes focused on the work of Christ for you and for me and what he's done for us. His grace, his mercy, his love, his righteousness, his goodness, right? His justification, everything is focused on those things. So it says on April 26th, the first day of the new year, during the 27th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, the army of the king of Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon fought so hard against Tyre that the warriors' heads were rubbed bare and the shoulders were raw and blistered. Yet Nebuchadnezzar and his army won no plunder to compensate them for all their work. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will give the land of Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He will carry off its wealth, plundering everything in it, so he can pay his army. Yes, I have given him the land of Egypt for a reward for his work, says the sovereign Lord, because he is working for me when he destroyed Tyre. And that day will come when I cause the ancient glory of Israel to revive. Then, Ezekiel, your words will be respected. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Okay, so another interesting little prophecy concerning Egypt. And we get a little insight into the military-industrial complex here. Is that first of all, this idea that, militaries need money, right? To have a good military, you need to have funds, and the more funds you have, the more obviously you can build your military up. And that's just how it works. Money does work. So when you put a stop, when a country says to another country, hey, we're not going to pay you, we're not going to give you this money anymore, then that country is not going to be able to take that money and use it for their military industrial complex, right? Because that's maybe what they're doing with that money. Maybe they're taking that $11 billion that the country gave, $21 billion, and they're putting it into military action. Well, Tyre was this incredible sea military, and Egypt spent some time over there, but they just didn't get a lot of money from that act of war. So we know that acts of war, there's money that's generated in different ways. Even in our day, money kind of you've heard of what is it? What was it? Hoover? One of our presidents said, or it was someone said, I can't remember. I was reading a history book the other day on war, and I remember someone in government said there was no war that he didn't like, or something like that. And you might understand that, but it's the idea that when war happens, money is being potentially made, and sometimes we can hear politicians say this is for the good of the country, and what they might mean by that, they don't divulge it, but what they mean by that is we're going to make a lot of money, and that's why we're doing this. And a lot of times it's not very good, right? And we try to really maybe say no to that as the little people. But it really doesn't work, the Nebuchadnezzar's move. Now God, it says, is moving Nebuchadnezzar's army in these directions, and it's all in relationship to Israel. So you think of Israel today and all the surrounding areas of Israel, and you think of what God is doing in all these different countries, even in their military, and how it's playing a role in the relationship between God and Israel. There's a sovereignty going on that we see of God. And so when we say nothing's out of God's control, that's what we're saying, is that God is very much not just aware, but there is a purposing in the work of God. Now, this is cool to us. I know that's a lot, but I think of it this way in the devotion. God has a purpose. When we say God has a purpose and a plan, that's really true in the sense that, there is purpose in this. Not just purpose in it, but there is a plan in it. It might be to strip me of all my idols. And maybe that's what God's doing in my life. Is God saying, hey, I'm going to make you more like my son Jesus, but to do that, Bo, we need to go through the suffering. You need to go through the fellowship of suffering that Christ went through. And that fellowship of suffering is a stripping of the idols in your life and moving you to a single focus, and that's me. And it might be that. And that might be, and you know what? When I think about all of us as human beings, that's what it's getting down to. That's what it's coming always to, right? Is we're all going to be stripped of everything. And all we're going to have. And I've seen people die over and over and over. I've seen a lot of people die. I've seen my own parents breathe their last. I've seen a lot of death. And you know what? You die alone. We don't die with anybody else. We die alone. It's us. It's our body. It's our breath. It's the last breath. And that is something that we all are going to go through. And Egypt's not going to be there. Tyre's not going to be there. Just God is moving us to just him and me. And it says that momentary affliction is not even worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be. The work of Jesus Christ has transitioned us from death to life. That last breath is not the end. It is now the beginning through the redeeming work of Jesus Christ to forgive us of our sins and redeem our bodies, cleanse us, purify us, sanctify us, right? This is what God is doing in Israel too. He is going to raise them to a glorious position. Isn't that cool? Yeah, their momentary affliction will be light, but it is working for them some glorious thing. Ooh, I see that Romans 8 parallel in this section a little bit. So that's cool. Okay, so chapter 30. For this is another message that came to me from the Lord. Son of man, prophesy and give this message from the sovereign Lord. Weep and wail, for the terrible day is almost here. The day of the Lord. Oh, that's cool. The day of the Lord? That sounds like the book of Revelation a little bit. And it says, it is the day of clouds and gloom, a day of despair for the nations. A sword will come against Egypt, and those who are slaughtered will cover the ground. Its wealth will be carried away, and its foundations destroyed. The land of Ethiopia will be ravished. Ethiopia, Libya, Lydia, and all Arabia, and all the other allies. All these places playing an important role, right? And how they've treated Israel. They will be destroyed in war, for this is what the Lord says. All of Egypt's allies will fail, and the pride of her power will end. From Migdol to Aswan, they will be slaughtered by the sword, it says the sovereign Lord. Egypt's going to go through some battles. They're going to go through some trials, and they are going to lose. And they're not going to be able to even lean on their partners and their allies. It says Egypt will be desolate, surrounded by desolate nations, and its cries will be cities will be in ruins, surrounded by other ruined cities. And the people of Egypt will know that I am the Lord. So it is something that God is moving in Egypt as well to get this, to prove, to show Egypt that the Lord is truly the Lord. So God does have a concern for the Egyptian people. We've seen that over and over in the prophets, that God is not just concerned, he loves, he cares. And so it says, when I have set Egypt on fire and destroyed all their allies, at that time I will send swift messengers and ships to terrify the complacent Ethiopians. And it says, on that day, Egypt's certain destruction, watch for it. It is sure to come. So the proof is in the pudding, right? If the Bible's true, then there's going to be some accuracy, not just some accuracy. You could expect it all to be accurate. If it's of God, it's going to have to be accurate. I mean, can God really get things all wrong? What kind of God is the one that gets it all wrong, right? So it would have to be true. So Egypt's going to go from this glorious place of Pharaoh and, all this glory to a not so prominent place. It will want to lean on other people, but other people are not going to be there consistently to help it. Egypt's going to go through its turmoil in a sense, and it's going to have to struggle alone, right? Trying to lean on others, but those old relationships just ain't gonna be there. It's like us. We try to lean on maybe old friendships, old things like that, and they aren't what they used to be. They're not going to fulfill that need that we have. They're not going to take the place of God. And that's what God's showing the world, is that when the world is leaning on each other instead of on God, we find out we all have feet made of clay, and we all fold under the pressure. It's kind of interesting to know, is my relationships like this? Do I put so much pressure on people that I'm around, that I'm leaning on them so much that there's no way they can support me? I've literally put way too much on them. Maybe that's how sometimes I live. Maybe I have to learn how to ease the burden and trust the Lord with those things that I really need in my life, and not lean on so many other people, for emotional needs, that is. Maybe the Lord can supply me those emotional needs. And that way, I'm not being that heavy burden where people get crushed under my weight, per se. So it says, God says, hey, I'm going to destroy the Nile River, verse 12, and sell the land to wicked men, and I will destroy the land of Egypt and everything in it by its hands of foreigners. I, the Lord, have spoken. Okay, so people will come in. Israel's going to be changed. It's going to be different than it once was. It certainly is today. In many ways, it's religion. It's, different things like that. It's very different. And it says, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will smash the idols of Egypt and the images of Memphis, and there will be no rulers left in Egypt. Terror will sweep the land. I will destroy southern Egypt, set it on fire. I don't think they have a pharaoh. They haven't had a pharaoh for a long time, have they? And it says, and I will bring judgment on Thebes. I will pour out my fury on Pelusium, the strongest fortress of Egypt, and I will stamp out the hordes of Thebes. Yes, I will set fire to all Egypt. Pelusium will be racked with pain. Thebes will be torn apart. Memphis will live in constant terror. The young men of Heliopolis and Budatis will die in battle, and the women will be taken away as slaves. And when I come to break the proud strength of Egypt, it will be a dark day for Taphanes too, a dark cloud covering Taphanes, and its daughters will be led away captive. So I will greatly punish Egypt, and they will know that I am the Lord. So we always see that theme here. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. It's interesting. Jesus had a lot of I am statements, didn't he? Yeah. And I'm sure everybody got it of his day of what exactly he was saying, right? A mere man, they said, claims to be God because he always spoke in these ways. I am the light. I am the door. I am the thing. This is how Yahweh always speaks in the Old Testament. I am the Lord. I am the Lord, right? This is how you'll know I am the Lord. And Jesus speaks in the same way. On April 29th, during the 11th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, this message came to me from the Lord, Son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh. That idea of arm, right? The strength, if you will. And it says of Egypt, his arm has been put in a cast so that it may heal. Neither has it been bound up with a splint to make it strong enough to hold a sword. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am the enemy of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and I will break both of his arms, the good arm along with the broken one, and I will make his sword clatter to the ground. I will scatter the Egyptians to many lands throughout the world. I will strengthen the arms of Babylon's king and put my sword in his hand. I will break the arms of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he will lie there mortally wounded, groaning in pain. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, while the arms of Pharaoh's fall useless to his sides. And I will put my sword in the hand of the Babylonian king, and he'll bring it against Egypt. Egypt will know that I am the Lord. I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, dispersing them throughout the earth, and they will know that I am the Lord. So we should expect that Egyptians to be all over the place, right? They'll be all over the world. Everybody will be all over the world, and then they'll be brought back. You know, there's a real beautiful passages about the restoration we read of Egypt, that Egypt will be restored. It will be it'll be a place. They'll be in good relationship with Israel at one point. And there's going to be in what's called the millennial kingdom, the kingdom of Christ, a time of good relationship there. So restoration, we always see that there needs to be, first of all, though, a stripping, right? Kind of a hitting that bottom, going, hey, everything I relied on just ain't working for me anymore. Man, the bottle, the drugs, right? The sexual things, the this, the that, the trying to control, the manipulating, the coercing, blah, 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 right? The fear, the insecurities, all this stuff, it's no longer working for me anymore. I can't control everybody anymore, right? And it's like that Twilight Zone where the dictator tries to control everything. He's taken, he's finally won, and he's finally the dictator. But now that he's dealing with trying to control everybody, and it's freaking him out, and he's becoming weirded out, and he sees that he falls apart, and he cracks, and that's us. This is the story of us as humans. It's not something to point to the Egyptians and go, look at you, or look at you, tired. But no, it's to look at you and to look at me and go, that's me. That's me. I've leaned on the wrong thing. I've trusted in the wrong thing. And now I am turning towards God. That's what repenting is. I am now turning towards God. I'm no longer leaning on my own understanding. I'm no longer just trusting in my own heart. I know that my heart is desperately wicked. It definitely will go the wrong direction. I definitely need saving now by grace. I can't do it my own. I realize that I'm totally inept, but I need total salvation. Do you see how these passages move us? God is moving us always to the place of saying, see, it's me that is doing it. I need to save you. You need to no longer lean on these other things. You can't trust in the Ethiopians. You can't trust in this. You can't lean on them. They'll crack. They're going to fall apart. You lean on the government. You think the government's going to make it for you. You're wrong, right? They will fall apart. It will crack, right? It'll be flawed. Yeah. Only God is perfect, and only He can supply what we really need. He is our creator. Very cool. So I find it very applicable to our life for sure. So what does Patty Farmer say here? I just checked out it says 48 and 49 BC, Cleopatra the 7th says, my trusted companion. There you go. So thanks, Laura. Thanks, Patty. And thank you, Tina and Michael. And Michael's always got good words, which is awesome. But anyway, thanks so much for joining me this morning. And we will talk to you guys soon. Have a good weekend, okay? Take care. Bye-bye.